Hi again. In her autobiography, The Mother of Peace, True Mother reminds us of the turmoil that the world was going through at the time of her birth. She describes Earth groaning in anguish as a battleground where human beings were shedding one another's blood. This was the time of Japanese occupation that lasted from 1905, when they signed the Protectorate Treaty with Japan, until 1945, when Korea was liberated at the conclusion of World War II. Pretty soon, we're going to see how hard Satan tried to wipe True Mother out before she was able to meet True Father. But first, let's take a look at a precious few stories from her earliest years. These are some of the experiences that cradled and shaped the early life of our True Mother. And I suggest you really try to imagine her experience. Put yourself in her mind as she expresses these stories. The title of this episode is A Heart Designed by Heaven. If you pay attention, there is so much content here that brings you into the mind and heart of our True Mother. But I especially enjoy her childhood memories. They are so poetic and innocent. And despite the incredible burden that she has chosen to carry throughout her life, I believe that this young girl who speaks here is still alive within the heart of our True Mother. Many of you know True Mother as the mother, but today I would like to introduce you to True Mother, the child, the sweet little girl with a beautiful, peaceful, wise, and bright demeanor. Listen to this example as she recounts some of her earliest childhood memories in her hometown, because these are the experiences that shaped her heart. Listen. When I gently closed my eyes and listened to the harsh winds blowing through the cornfield, it sounded like thousands of horses running in the wilderness. It captured the dynamic spirit of Goguryeo knights galloping powerfully across the continent. At other times, if I listened quietly, I would hear another kind of sound, the affectionate whoo, whoo of the scops owls high in the branches of trees deep in the mountains. I remember those summer nights when I fell asleep holding my mother's hand, with the sound of hooting owls echoing in my ears. More than 70 years have passed, but the beautiful scenery and soothing sounds of Anju remain in my heart. My hometown holds many beautiful memories for me, and I want to go back there. One day, I will certainly return home. Can you picture what True Mother is describing? I believe she is describing the environment of her heart. It was these early years that made such an impression on True Mother. The world was in chaos, but somehow God was able to cradle her while all of this crazy stuff was happening. I feel that Mother is describing the motherly heart of God through her experiences. She fell asleep while holding her mother's hand, listening to the owls. I believe these simple childhood memories continued to cradle her heart throughout her mission to become the true mother of humanity. Listen further. I was born in 1943 in Anju, South Pyongan province of what is now North Korea, at 4:30 a.m., February 10 of the solar calendar, and the 6th day of the first lunar month of that year. Okay, this is interesting to note here, because father and mother, both father and mother, were born on the same day. That is, the 6th day of the first lunar month. Do you know who else was born on the 6th day? Adam and Eve. Interesting, right? Let us continue. When I was born, my father, Han Sung-eun, had a dreamlike vision. He saw bright sunlight beaming into a thick grove of pine trees. The light fell on two cranes that were dancing together in harmonious affection. He decided to name me Hak Ja, which means crane child. Okay, the crane is thought to signify longevity, peace, wisdom, and fidelity. My home was not far from the center of the village, and the surrounding neighborhood had a very warm and cozy feeling, as if we were chicks cuddled together under a mother hen. Behind it rose a small, verdant hill covered with chestnut and pine trees. Beautiful flowers bloomed, and colorful leaves fell with the rhythm of the seasons, and I heard every kind of bird singing and chirping together. When spring warmed the earth, yellow forsythias smiled brightly between the fences, and azaleas bloomed red upon the hill. A small stream flowed through our village, and except when it froze solid in midwinter, I could always hear the laughing sounds of the water. I grew up enjoying the happy sounds of birds and the stream, as if they were a choir of nature. Even now, thinking of my life in my hometown is like snuggling into a cozy and heartwarming mother's embrace. This memory brings tears to my eyes. You see, she describes the embrace of nature all around her. I think True Mother is not just describing her experience as a young girl. I believe she is also describing the depth and the vastness of her own heart as a mother. Don't you think that the person who is called as the mother of the universe also contains the universe in her own heart? Don't you think that through these words she is also hinting at her own love for us, for you? When she describes the loving embrace of nature, don't you think this is how she wants to embrace you? Let me take it one step further. Don't you think this is the type of love that she wishes for us to have for others? Between our house and the hill, we had a small cornfield. When the corn was ripe, the husks would crack, and yellow kernels of corn would appear through the long, silky hair. My mother would boil the ripened corn, put a generous number of cobs in a bamboo basket, and call our neighbors to come and eat. They would come into our house through the gate built from sticks, sit in a circle on our porch, and eat cobs of corn with us. She felt embraced by nature, and she felt embraced by her mother. Can you picture this? Can you picture her? This cute little girl with pinchable cheeks? Listen. I would squeeze in between the grown-ups and try to eat the kernels off the small cob of corn. But as a small child, I was never successful. Noticing me, my mother would smile gently, break off some yellow kernels from her cob, and put them into my mouth. I remember the sweet corn kernels rolling around in my mouth as if it were yesterday. Isn't this adorable? Why are the corn kernels rolling around in her mouth? Probably because she doesn't have many teeth yet, right? Perhaps just the front teeth are in, but her soft gums cannot quite pop down on the kernels. She was probably wedging them between her tongue and her gums and her cheeks, and swallowing some of them whole. Why not take some time to imagine her as that young little girl? Can you feel the hands of her mother softly pressing the kernels into her mouth? True mother remembers it as if it were yesterday. What does that mean? It means she remembers it clearly and perhaps frequently. True mother's early experiences with her mother and grandmother and Mother Nature not only nurtured her as a young girl, but I believe these memories have continued to cradle True mother's heart throughout her many challenges up until today. Yes. Let us read more. My sweet child, shall we go to church? When I heard those words, I would run to my mother. She would take my hand in hers and we would walk to church. I think the long walk with my mother was why I liked going to church. Her mother isn't telling her, pushing her. She's inviting her to church. Her true mother's earliest memories of church were so warm and welcoming. But why? She explained why. It is because she enjoyed the journey there with her mother. She wasn't scolding her or pushing her. Get on your shoes. Come on, it's time to go. We're going to be late. No. The love that she felt from her mother worked like a magnet. Like a magnet, naturally. What does this tell you? What does this tell you about True Mother's leadership? What does this tell you about the era of women's leadership? True Mother is teaching us about the magnetic power of mother's love. One Sunday, as we arrived back at our village after church, my mother stopped in her tracks. She plucked a wildflower blooming shyly on the roadside and tucked it into my hair, right behind my ear. She kissed my cheek and whispered to me with a delicate, loving voice, "How pretty you look, my one and only daughter of the Lord." Mother's eyes always looked the same. They were clear and deep, almost as if her irises were one with the blue sky. As I returned her gaze, I could glimpse the traces of tears, but not knowing her deep heart, I was only excited and delighted by the words, "One and only daughter of the Lord." True Mother felt her mother's love and was comforted by her words, but later came to know that she didn't yet understand the depth of her mother's heart. What does this say about our relationship with True Mother? Even though she pours her love and blessing into us, she knows that we do not yet understand the depth of her heart. Nonetheless, she blesses us and encourages us with a tender voice. Also, we are continually reminded of the fact that Mother had to grow. Even though she came from a powerful line and she was blessed with spiritual gifts, she still had to grow. Her teeth had to come in before she could chew. Mother often called me precious daughter of the Lord with emphasis, as if she were praying. Throughout her life, this was the term that she used when she prayed for me, her only daughter. In this way, I grew up feeling honored that I was the daughter of God, the daughter of the Lord. I think this is magical. This is how she was being raised as God's only begotten daughter, in preparation to receive the second coming of the Lord. Think of how much devotion was being poured into this little girl and her environment. Think of how much devotion her mother and grandmother were investing to receive the Lord. When most Christians were looking up to the sky, these ardent Christian women were totally fixated on the most unlikely occurrence, that the returning Lord would be born physically in Korea, a nation in tatters. Their love and devotion was not based on any reasonable or humanistic theory. They were divinely guided by heaven. This environment was guided by heaven to help our true mother grow into her selfless mission. Listen, my grandmother and mother taught me the duties of heavenly love and not to obsess over what I was going through personally. They set an example for me, obeying God absolutely and wholeheartedly, For him, they did not mind carrying out exhausting measures that seemed to melt their very bone marrow. They would bow before Jesus hundreds and even thousands of times in a day. They cooked meals for Jesus and sewed clothes for him as if he were living in our house with us. And they did the same for the Lord they expected to return to Korea. This is exactly what a growing period designed by heaven looks like. Designed by heaven. They shared their faith with everyone they met, and their meager food and resources with anyone who needed it. Their generous and happy spirits moved me and shaped my character as I grew up. Several times a day, I would stand at the edge of our porch and look up at the clear sky. It was astonishing how often I saw 3 or 4 cranes in flight. I would continue my gaze at the sky even after the cranes were out of sight. My arms wrapped tightly around my chest to contain my heart, which I felt was about to burst out of me and join the cranes in the heavens. Honestly, as I prepared this message, I really didn't want to add any of my own words, because you just want to hear these heavenly words from our true mother's childhood. However, there's a story to tell. So, let us continue. At the end of the Second World War, Korea regained its independence but was divided in half at the 38th parallel. What should have been a joyous victory turned into despair. In the north, the Russians were putting the Communist Party in charge and began seriously oppressing the people. True Mother's father was convinced they needed to escape to the south immediately. But they were busy offering devotions for the returning Lord's arrival. So what did they do? Let's find out. I was 4 years old when my father suddenly appeared at our home to announce, "Conditions are not going to improve here. I cannot have my family live in North Korea. Let us go to the south." He loved them and wanted to protect them. She probably wanted to go with him, at least to secure her daughter's safety, don't you think? But for her, this was a question of faith. So what did she do? Her husband's request tore her in two. Would it be better to stay here and walk the unknown path of God's will, or should I elect to live as an ordinary housewife? She pondered these things and then made up her mind. "I will not succumb to the communist persecution," she said. "I will stay here and continue to walk the path of faith to receive the Lord." My father was dumbfounded, and he left as he had determined to do. This was a time of great Christian fervor. Pyongyang was called the Jerusalem of the East. This is what was going on. My mother resolved to remain in Pyongyang and continue her mission as a member of the faithful household of the Messiah. Though my father did his best to fulfill his duties as a husband and a father, God's providence broke up our family in the end. Watching him as he left through the gate, I thought, this will not be the last time I see my father. However, I was wrong. That was the last time I saw him. Sometimes I would wonder where he was and what he was doing, but I never set out to find him. This was because of the words I had heard from my grandmother and my mother from the time I was a little girl. Your father is God. I grew up knowing those words to be the unchanging truth. Since I was born as God's daughter, I firmly believed He is my true father. That is why I did not harbor any hurt over my father's departure. Like many families torn apart by the Korean War, True Mother never saw her father again. Although, much later in life, she found out that her father taught in an elementary school in Sorak, close to where she now lives. So she felt it was God's plan to unite them again. Even though it may not have been his destiny to remain with his daughter at that time, True Mother's father not only gave her her life, he gave her her name, Hak Ja, and he represented the entire Han lineage that prepared her birth. Of course, she loved her father. Of her father, she said, "When all is said and done, my father played an essential role." Also, True Mother's mother and grandmother always lovingly raised her to know that God was her father. Listen, because of such love in my home, I never worried about my life. Despite our poverty and despite my father not being with us, I was always content. This was because I knew that God was my father, that he was the reason for me being alive, and that he was always right there by my side, taking care of me. I sensed that God was my real parent from the moment of my birth. So, True Mother was guiding us to relate with God as our heavenly parent. Only begotten son and only begotten daughter doesn't mean they are the only children of God, but that they open the way for us to be able to relate with our heavenly parent in the same way. It is our original inheritance. True Mother's lineage was prepared. Together with her mother and grandmother, they were united as one. And I believe that this unity and their unceasing devotion acted as a firewall of protection against Satan's advances, even though he attacked from the very beginning. In fact, here's a little story about that. You know, there's a tradition in Korea that after a mother gives birth, when the whole family supports her recovery, it is a sacred time. They eat a special seaweed soup that nourishes the mother's exhausted body. It is literally the first meal after childbirth. Imagine that moment as a young mother. You're exhausted, but you're also elated with the birth of your baby. You wish to comfort and nurse your child in your arms and rest. So here, True Mother recounts the experience that her mother had at that time. After my mother ate her first bowl of seaweed soup, she cradled me in her arms and fell asleep. As she dreamed, she saw Satan, a monstrous demon that appeared before her. He shouted so loudly that even the mountains and streams rang with his fearsome voice. "If I let this baby be, the world will be in danger," he yelled. "I must do away with her right now." Suddenly, he made as if to strike me. My mother held me closely and cast upon him all her energy to declare his defeat. "Satan, be gone at once," she said fiercely. "How dare you try to hurt her, when she is the most precious child to heaven? I cast you out in the name of the Lord. Get out of my presence. You have no right to be here. Heaven has claimed this child, and your days of power have come to an end." She was screaming so loudly that the grandmother rushed into the room as if it was a physical fight. But they realized that this was an answer to their prayers. This was an attack, and there would be many more subsequent attacks to come. But it only furthered their resolve. They knew it was a fight between good and evil. Listen. "I must raise my child with complete devotion," my mother vowed to herself. "I will raise her to become a pure and beautiful girl for the Lord and protect her from the pollution of the secular world." About a month later, she had another dream. This time, a heavenly angel dressed in shimmering white came to her in a sunlit cloud. "Sune," the angel spoke, I am sure you must feel incapable to prepare this baby for the service that our Heavenly Father has in mind. But don't be. This baby is the daughter of the Lord, and you are her nanny. Please devote all your energies to raising her with absolute faith, love, and obedience. You know, this is where Mother's mother is really fully inheriting the mission to raise her with absolute ownership. Mother tells the story about how Satan never gave up. He continued to pursue them, to chase them. He appeared in her mother's dreams continually. True Mother heard these stories. Even though she was cradled in the love of our Heavenly Parent, she was made aware at a very young age that Satan desperately wanted to hurt her, and she wondered why. You know, it took 6,000 years for her to be born. 6,000 years. And even though humankind has been waiting, we were ignorant about what we were waiting for. Mother tells us that there was no concept of the only begotten daughter among the world religions. And yet, upon the foundation of all of the sacrifice that was offered, we see the masterful hands of God cradling this young, beautiful child. How much God suffered to see Eve, his first daughter, devoured by selfishness. So how much he must have longed for this daughter to be born, so that he may raise her to reveal his original plan for us. That is why we must understand our true mother. I was molded from my conception to be the true mother who would devote her life to God's purposes. I see everything from that perspective: the Japanese colonial rule and the Korean War. My childhood full of hardships, my family consisting of my maternal grandmother, my mother, and the Christian love that enveloped us day and night. I treasure it as a growing period designed by heaven. With these stories, True Mother is describing the environment of her growth that was divinely guided by heaven to help her grow to the position of our true mother. These precious experiences with her devoted mother and grandmother, their devotion with Christianity, as well as the intoxicating beauty of Mother Nature, nurtured her as a young girl. But these memories burn brightly in Mother's heart and have continued throughout her life to comfort her. The challenges were real. They knew it was a fight between good and evil, and she was made aware of that at a very young age. We cannot advance if we think lightly about evil. It does exist, and its most scary tactic is to make you believe that it doesn't exist. Look, it took 6,000 years for True Mother to be born on earth, and we were all totally ignorant about what we were waiting for. God surely longed for this daughter to be born and to grow well, so that he may reveal his original plan. When you read this book, you are reading the account of God's masterpiece. So why do we read it? Look, she's not just telling us stories. I believe she conveyed her childhood experiences in a way that can help us inherit the same mindset towards God, because we are all God's children. Mother is also reminding us that she had to grow in order to understand the fullness of God's heart. At the same time, she knows very well that we do not understand the depths of her heart yet. But she is comforted by our Hyojung because she can see that we try. Think about it. Do any of her stories in here remind you of experiences you've had? If you think back to your life. You may notice many instances where God was there right beside you, singing through the dancing leaves of a nearby tree. True parents are only interested in helping us all unite with the true love of God. True mother is especially qualified to convey the magnetic nature of God's motherly love, don't you think? A nature that is now contained within her own heart. And in this era of women's leadership, I believe she wishes for all of us to learn a thing or two about God's soft powers. Pay attention to them, because they are all around us. And especially now in this era, our true parents want us to become expert connoisseurs of God's nature. We should be able to balance our minds and our actions in the same harmonious ways of nature. It was this type of aptitude that helped this 3-generation trinity of women to weave their way through the bombs and the bullets of Satan's fury. And if you want to hear more about that, I'll share about it next time. But for now, let us end where we began, looking through the window of our true mother's heart, a heart that is longing to return home and bring all of us along with her, a heart designed by heaven. Listen. When I gently closed my eyes and listened to the harsh winds blowing through the cornfield, it sounded like thousands of horses running in the wilderness. It captures the dynamic spirit of Goguryeo knights galloping powerfully across the continent. At other times, if I listened quietly, I would hear another kind of sound, the affectionate hoo-hoo of scops owls in the high branches of trees deep in the mountains. I remember the summer nights when I fell asleep holding my mother's hand, with the sound of hooting owls echoing in my ears. More than 70 years have passed, but the beautiful scenery and soothing sounds of Anju remain in my heart, and I want to go back there. One day I will certainly return home.